you started your career in iBanking. Well, you started as an Olympian, which we'll touch on a little bit. Field hockey.
I know it's not really a sport in this country. I told everybody I played on Canada's hockey team, and then they heard the accent, and they're like, wait, what? Field hockey, isn't that the girl sport with skirts? Yeah.
So started as an Olympian, moved into iBanking at Deloitte,
Correct.
investment banking, then moved to Harvest as an investor, supporting some of these studio companies, and now as your own founder. And so I think you've sort of seen the full spectrum of what a company needs to be, in the sense that it needs to be like in iBanking, you see it in its end state when it gets acquired. In venture, you see it at like its beginning state with a view towards where it has to go. And now as a founder, seeing it sort of hands-on at the beginning.
Yeah.
What perspective do you have? And sort of tying back to like venture outcome as well. I think you're right that so many VCs look at venture outcomes or think that they know what's going to get you to a venture outcome. But so often it's just about keeping the aperture so broad that you could go so many different directions based on where traction comes, right? So how do you think about that beginning state versus that end state, and how to get between those two?
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part is the messy middle. That is the hardest part of building any business. I mean, what types of outcomes are there? I mean, there's obviously exiting a business, selling it to somebody else. There's taking a business public. The one that nobody really talks about, which is unfortunately a reality, is your business goes to zero. Like, you go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And I think that the iBanking side showed me, I was on the sell side, mergers and acquisitions, so I saw a lot of successful outcomes. I think like when it comes to venture, again, and we'll probably get into this, but depending on what country you live in, what is a venture outcome? And I think that I'm going to use the US as an example, the concept of failing in the US is like, it's applauded. It's, you took a risk, you had a go, you were trying to build something big. I mean, and if you think about it too, if venture is taking a risk on a multi-billion dollar outcome, they're trying to predict something that doesn't exist today. Like, I mean, they call themselves smart, it's just like effective gambling. But at the end of the day, it's like, nobody knew when Uber first started out that it was going to be the global marketplace for mobility. Right? And then obviously a food delivery platform, a freight marketplace, it could have died on its at the beginning there. So I think that's the other thing too, is like, we need to incentivize more people to have a belief in what the future can be, and have a capital ecosystem to help support people to try and bring that into reality. And that's the thing about venture that I really love. We've made a lot of investments in Canada. We've also made a lot of investments in the US. Some that people would be like, whoa, like a high altitude weather balloon business, or a fetal cord blood banking business. We can talk about that another day. But I think that it's just like, you're trying to look and perceive what the future could look like. How do I bring it forward and find the right people around me to help support pursuing that? And not being afraid to fail.
At the top, you mentioned Chris Simair, who Chris Simair, founder of SkipTheDishes, then founder of Neo Financial, both of your bosses, right? Yeah, but but you worked for Chris for a long time and had that latitude. I have the perception that Chris Simair might be remembered as one of the best operators in Canadian history. But his name is not often that well known. And so I'm curious, like, working directly for him, what did you learn from him? And what did you take away? And do you share my perspective?
Yeah. I mean, some people might say I had a bromance with Chris. But no, I mean, the guy is, like, in my opinion, he would be like one of the best founders, I mean, definitely in the country, but maybe in North America. To think that came out of like a small town in Prince Albert is like really cool. But no, he just thinks differently. And trying to stay on his wavelength is hard sometimes. But how he thinks is, when I talk about thinking about what the future could look like and bringing it forward, we all look at food delivery and we're like, well, yeah, like, of course, food delivery. But when they first set out to go and build that, like, it wasn't an obvious thing. So I think obviously looking at the bet that those guys took trying to build a bank, like that is a very ambitious bet.
Yeah.
And they've also raised a lot of money to go and do that. And I think that in terms of the eyes of venture capitalists, like, I mean, even employees, like you look at that and it's an inspiring individual. And I mean, it's a team of individuals that you can be a part of and learn a lot from. So I definitely learned a lot and could attribute a lot of the success, failures, struggles, problems that I've been able to learn from Chris too.
Yeah, cool. Also, for you guys, I wanted to start the conversation not losing ourselves too much and talking about the macro and one really to focus on your backstory. But I did definitely want to get your sense of the Canadian tech ecosystem before you left. And so in our prep call, you told me that the Canadian VC model is broken.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So, I mean, I spoke a little bit about what it looks like in the US. At the end of the day, everything is pattern matching. And pattern matching is effectively trying to understand, like, who do venture capitalists report to?
Yeah.
They report to their investors, their LPs. What are those LPs' incentives? And based on those incentives, that'll tell you what the outcome is that those venture capitalists are trying to achieve there. My perspective is that, again, I mentioned this a little earlier, but the concept of failure is something that is like, it's frowned upon almost, and it's kind of scary to approach building a business, going to that layer of the capital stack, and building something that you think might fail, right? Like, if we were all operating under the notion that everything was guaranteed, nobody would take a risk on anything.
Right.
So my view is that when I say it's broken, I feel like there is a lack of support for taking risks.
Right.
And there is a reward with every risk that you take. And I think the underwriting of that risk relative to the reward, to the outcome, is something where there's a bit of a mismatch. And I think that there's more favorable terms that could be approached and received from ventures maybe outside of the Canadian ecosystem. But that's not I mean, one could argue it's a failure of the VCs, but no, they've got an incentive alignment that they're trying to
And that incentive alignment is to raise a second fund, right? Or raise a third fund.
One of the alignments.
Right.
Yeah.
And so often they'll look to like BDC or they'll look to like these big corporations to come in as an LP or a limited partner, someone who invests in a fund. And so often when you talk about pattern matching, you're talking about that those groups often move slower, and so those VCs are going to be a bit more risk averse as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like, and I'm not saying that all venture capitalists are motivated by raising their next fund, but their mechanics are generally what's called a 2-on-20. They take a 2% management fee and they get 20% of the carry. If they're only in it to raise and make management fees, then they care more about appeasing their LPs based on that incentive alignment than actually making bold bets and trying to change the future, which to me is like what venture should be.
Yeah.
So